everyone, and welcome to the Power Platform Show. Today, we have Dux Raymond Sy from AvePoint on the show. So we're going to talk to him a bit about being an ISV. We're going to talk about public speaking. You know, he's got a lot of experience in the space. We're going to talk about personal brand. And, you know, he's been many years in the SharePoint space, built his brand and credibility. He's now an MVP, regional director. So much this guy gives back to the community and so much insights that he shares in the show. Full show notes can be found at nz365guy.com/210. That's 210 at nz365guy.com. Now, let's get on with the show. Hey, Dux, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark, thank you. So grateful to be here and I'm glad to be a part of the show.
It's good, man. It's good. So you've recently kicked off your own podcast, is that right?
Yes, sir.
How's it going?
Oh, it's been phenomenal. The podcast is called Shift Happens Podcast, and we're focused on sharing modern workplace stories from leading organizations around the world. We're in season 2 now, and boy, so far the stories have been really insightful and a lot to learn from these wonderful companies.
Awesome. So good to hear. So good to hear. Tell me a bit about you. Where do you hail from? What's your background?
Absolutely. So I'm originally from the deep south, Manila, Philippines.
Wow. I know the place.
Yeah, you know it fairly well, right?
I've been there a couple of times. Yeah, done some work there.
Awesome. But I've been living in the United States, since 1996. These days, I live in Washington, D.C., and I serve as a chief marketing officer at AvePoint.
So how you bearing up with all this COVID-19 stuff?
I got to tell you, I'm very thankful that despite obviously the lockdown and some of the limitations of what I could do, overall, my family's safe and healthy, both here and around the world. And I still have my work that I'm able to do remotely. So I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, going good. 5 weeks in lockdown. This is our first day where we moved from what's called a level 4 in our country to level 3. So a little less restrictive. Still can't travel kind of like interstate. So it means that I can't go and see the wider family at this point. But went out and had my first coffee this morning, in 5 weeks. From a barista. So that was
nice. I miss the coffee there. Y'all make proper coffee, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. So true. Listen, I think the last time I saw you in person was in Wellington, New Zealand, way back at a SharePoint conference. I don't even know how many. It'll be over 10 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah, around that time. And I got to tell you, I was supposed to go there this May for a Microsoft 365 conference, and unfortunately, it's not going to happen anymore. Hopefully, I get back down there soon.
Yeah. So what do you do with your spare time? Family-wise, that type of thing? What do you get up to?
Yeah, I'm addicted to running. So especially these days, every other day I go running. That gives me my time and really gets me to think. But as a family, we just love to hang out and cook together. So my son's 14 now, my daughter's 9. They're getting into cooking. They're enjoying, especially this time when we're all locked down at home. And it's just wonderful that despite all this, as a family, we get to know each other more, right? Because back in the days when things were quote unquote normal, we're all busy. Like, oh, I got to take them to this game or this activity. Monday to Friday I have work, or I'm traveling somewhere in the world. So we get to spend a lot of family time together these days.
Yeah. What are your thoughts around what's the new normal do you think the world's going to move into that's kind of born out of this? Do you think we're just going to flip back to how it was, let's say, post-January this year, and I'm talking about business life, family, all that type of thing? Or what's your expectations?
I think realistically, the world's not going to be the same. I think when we think about how it was like before, that's a long time away. I think 3 things that will drastically shift as we go back to somewhat of a normal world. From a business perspective, I think business travel will drastically change. Even if, let's say, the vaccine comes out, I think just this idea of we can actually meet remotely. So forget about the pandemic, forget about the virus. It's just we've proven this experiment that we can actually work from home and still get stuff done. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still some face-to-face meetings and travel that needs to happen, but I think it'll drastically slow down because we've proven that through technology, we can make it work. So I think that will change between meetings and conferences and a lot of the business travel we used to do. I think all that would just be reduced. A second, I think from a family and societal perspective, social distancing will be around for a while. So think about going to restaurants where used to be they would pack people in restaurants or bars. I think that's going to change. Schools, for example, one idea that's being floated around, at least in some school systems here in the US, is a lot of the classrooms are packed with a lot of children. So now they would have to separate them out for social distancing reasons. But then physically, the space may not be able to handle it. So now they're thinking of hybrid. How can they have alternate schedule where some kids go to school and the others would stay at home, do remote learning, and have this hybrid model? So the second thing will change some of the societal interactions we have due to social distancing. And then the last part, third, is I think we'll rethink on how we engage with people, both personally and professionally. So in the past, right, like handshake, for example, that's something we do when we meet new people. Or even with family, you give your family a hug or a kiss on the cheek. All that now, and it's not to say that we don't want to do it, but we're going to be more protective of that, right? And I think about like my siblings, my kids' aunts and uncles, or their cousins. Like these are immediate family, but then once you see them, to protect yourself, protect themselves, that will change. And I think that will stay that way for a short period of time, or a long period of time, I should say.
Yeah, interesting. See, one of the things that, I always recognize you for is that you're often at, events like Ignite and things like that, and you've got the cameras and you're moving around interviewing various people. What impact is this going to have on those big tech events in our space?
So I still don't know when these big tech events when will happen. So as you've seen, Microsoft already announced that between now and at least July 2021, there's no big gatherings that they're going to do. Smaller events, I think, even if, let's say, we get the go signal that, you can now go to events or even watch concerts or sports events, I think a lot of people themselves would think twice to attend or to go to big gatherings. So I think that would be the impact. And I think that would cause a shift to a lot of these virtual events as well.
So let's just take Ignite, for example. Let's push it out beyond a year. Like Microsoft, obviously, they're going to skill up, for one, at running events virtually. They're going to get the technology right, I assume, over the next 12 months for running big tech events. After all that investment is made, do you see them going back to having, the big events in Vegas and various places around the US? Do you reckon the economics will be there to go back to that model?
I think it will come back, but I would say, and hopefully I'm wrong, it's not going to be until 3 to 5 years from now. I think it will come back because we will overcome this pandemic. We'll figure out how to get rid of it or cure it. And it's only after then, and when people are very comfortable, that's when it's going to come back. But in the interim, you're right. They'll figure out some effective way to engage virtually.
Yeah. I mean, we're a week away from, a bit over a week, as in from this, we're doing this recording now, from Microsoft Business Application Summit, which, last year, I think 7,000 people were there in Atlanta. I went to the one the year before, which was in Seattle, and, that was a very hardly put on event. I think 3,000 or 4,000 people attended. I think that this one is probably going to blow the numbers away, maybe double what they had last time at least. And I'm just wondering if Microsoft looks at that and goes, our reach is so much larger if we go virtual than in going in person, and our costs are different, but I can't imagine they're more expensive to do a virtual event than an in-person.
You say more expensive or cheaper?
Cheaper, yeah.
Well, I do agree, but if you step back, right, you have to think about the audience as well. So for me, especially being responsible for marketing at AppPoint, certainly these virtual events are great because potentially we can reach more people. But then you think about events like Inspire, which is a very partner-focused event, right? Well, certainly you can still deliver the content online, but the key part of Inspire, and frankly, that's what I go to Inspire for, is the interactions, the networking. It's connecting with partners, connecting with Microsoft leadership. I still have a question mark on how you replicate, or not even replicate, but make that experience as close to what you get in-person networking.
So that's an interesting thing, and I'm interested to pick your brains on it, being that you're somebody in the position with AvePoint that you're wanting to, network with potential buyers, things like that of your products. And these events often had big expo areas and things like that. How do we virtualize that part of it that gives the type of connectedness similar or on par to what we had in a physical world. What are
Sure.
your thoughts around how you make that possible?
So let me share a couple examples of what we've been doing lately and then what we're going to do in the future. So because of this COVID-19, a lot of our in-person investments, be it sponsoring events or facilitating workshops with customers, all those are gone. Everything's now virtual, right? While prior to that, we did webinars, which is great. But again, webinars are good for learning and at least interacting the first time with potential customers. But for existing customers or networking purposes, webinars not just designed for it. So what we've done, for example, workshops. So we're doing these series of virtual workshops now where it's not as big as a webinar. It's very highly targeted. So let's say we're focused on government or we're focused on life sciences. And the idea is in this workshop, we use tools like Microsoft Teams to make it more intimate so people can ask questions. But at the same time, we encourage people to turn on their video. And also, what we've also done is recently in a workshop we did, I believe in Europe, we did this workshop in the morning. So we sent breakfast to all the attendees, like physical food. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's just to
cool.
bridge that gap, right? It's still not the same, but you get the feel that, hey, everybody, thank you for attending this workshop. Hope you're enjoying the breakfast. What are you having? Oh, I'm having a croissant, or I'm enjoying this ham and cheese bagel, what have you. So it's these little things to connect and continue that in-person feel where you don't get online. And then the second thing you ask is, okay, how do you facilitate networking? So another good example is we have our yearly conference called Shift Happens Conference. Obviously, this year, we're not going to have it in person, but we're still going to do it virtual. It's free. And what we've done is maybe a few weeks before the event, we're expecting about 3,000 to 4,000 people, is we created an external Teams. So if you're part of the event, you'll be invited to this external Teams, and you can start asking questions and learning not only from experts, but also from your fellow colleagues as well. So now you get people to interact and build somewhat of a community, so that during the virtual conference where you deliver the content, there's going to be more affinity and context to it versus just jumping on and watching a video, right? And then after the online conference, that community will live on. So it's very intimate, it's very private. And then hopefully through that type of setup, we can still facilitate that networking and interaction that you would typically have in a physical event.
I like it. Okay, so just some interesting thoughts there on where the future is going and how you're handling it. I like it. Tell me about how you got into tech. How did you get your tech journey underway and what's it been like?
It's interesting. So, a lot of people know me publicly where I talk about SharePoint, I post videos, and today I serve as a chief marketing officer, but I started my tech chops in being a developer. So I have a degree in telecommunications engineering. My first job was I was an assembler coder at Siemens. It's a little company called Siemens. And and I used to program Motorola chips, writing assembler code. And boy, while I really appreciate that work, I learned so much. I figured it's just not my cup of tea. I'd rather talk to people than be coding all day. So soon after that, I started my own consulting company and where we provided services around the Microsoft suite of technologies. And that's where I got involved with SharePoint. Fast forward to today, I work at AvePoint. And like I said, help with a lot of the marketing initiatives for the company.
Okay, so one thing I've noticed about you is you're big on personal brand and you're kind of like almost the leader, I'd say, in our space of developing this. And this takes me back to, as I say, first seeing you present all those years ago and really sticking in my mind. What is a personal brand and why is it important for somebody in tech these days to consider how they brand themselves?
Yeah, the way I think of personal brand is essentially the perception or impression of an individual based on their experience, expertise, actions, or achievements within a community or ecosystem, right? So really, how do people look at you? That's essentially what personal brand is. And how I got started with this, and I realized that it's not only helpful from a professional perspective, but also the idea of being able to give back is when I had my consulting company. It's a small little company, and I didn't have all the marketing budget, if you may, that companies would have to promote what I could do for customers. And I came across, I was reading something, this was in early 2000. I was reading something and it says, look, customers want to buy, they don't want to be sold to, right? So a bulb just clicked on my head. I'm like, you're right. Like at that time, I would buy O'Reilly Media books, or I don't know if you remember O'Reilly Media, with those animal books. And I said, boy, I always look up to these technical writers and technical experts. So it dawned on me, you know what? For people to know me, other than promoting myself in a salesy way or spending money on marketing, I'm going to write a book. So I wrote a book, SharePoint for Project Management. And the idea was, how can you SharePoint for a specific business process or business use case around project management? So I did that. And then I learned so much from O'Reilly Media. They said, writing a book is great, but it's not enough. You got to promote your brand, promote yourself as the expert for this. And so they connected me and educated me on, you got to start writing a blog. There's this new thing called Twitter. You got to sign up for an account and start sharing your knowledge. You got to start speaking at events. And being an O'Reilly author, that helped me with my credibility. So I started speaking in tech events and whatnot. But in the end, I realized, look, personal brand is not just being out there and promoting how cool you are, or how smart you are, but it's essentially, in my mind, giving back, right? What can you give back? What have you learned that you can share with the public? What little nuggets did you find out that other people can learn from and benefit from? So that's my take and my perspective. And really, hopefully, the impression people have of myself is someone who's sharing knowledge, who's being able to promote key worthy causes, and just educating folks on what's possible.
So how does one go about it? Like if someone's listening to this and they're like, I've heard a lot about personal brand. What are the practicalities? What are the steps that I should be taking to build that out? What would your advice be?
I would say 5 key steps that really you have to think about. The first thing is, what's your goal? What's your purpose? Why do you want to do it? Because it doesn't happen overnight. I've been at this for, about 14, 15 years now. So at that time, my purpose, my goal is, I want to grow my business. I want to make money. I want to have a stable paycheck, right? So that was my goal, sales related. So first, figure out your goal. Or is it something that you're very altruistic and you just want to give back? Is that your goal? Or is your goal around providing better customer service for your company? So figure out your goal. That's step 1. Step 2, once you figure out your goal, is to identify what I call, what's your superpower? The last thing you want is just be a part of what the noisy echo chamber out there is. What's so special about you, right? So at that time, when I started my career and essentially positioning myself publicly, is, you know what? Everybody's talking about SharePoint, how to build servers, how to build web parts, but I'll be the first one talking about SharePoint for project management. And that's essentially my thing, right? You got to zero in on your superpower. Now, through time, does it change? Absolutely. We go through different phases of our life and our career. So your main message or your main superpower will change. So if your goal is to drive business around CRM, so don't just say, I'm an expert in Dynamics 365 CRM. What about it, right? Maybe focus on nonprofit, focus on healthcare, and then talk about use cases around that. So step 1 is why you're doing it, identify your superpower. Step 3, talk about it. And when I say talk about it, events, maybe, do webinars, maybe, but it could be little things, right? Write blog posts, write articles on LinkedIn. And these days, it's awesome because there's so many mediums you could do it in. The key, though, is when you talk about it, make sure you're providing value. You're not regurgitating what's in docs.microsoft.com or what Mark wrote about. It doesn't have to be something perfect. It could be things you've learned, things you failed at. Hey, I came across this problem, but I figured it out, right? So those are things that people love. And notice everything I put out is all about how to do certain things, or 5 tips to do certain things, and that's what I find something people gravitate towards versus an abstract pontification of some concept. I mean, you could do it, but I find that people would rather consume and learn things that they can apply quickly. So that's the third thing. Find your medium, be it LinkedIn or Twitter or YouTube or SlideShare or TikTok or Instagram. It's all good. Just make sure wherever you do it, that's where your audience is at. Which brings us to step 4, right? Who's your audience? So Knowing your audience is critical because going back to step 3, the content you put out should talk to them. If you want to pitch your position to decision makers who's making all the buying decisions, then you don't want to be overly technical. And back when I wrote SharePoint for Project Management or started talking about them, I was focused on project managers, not necessarily technical folks, because they will be my target audience. If they like my stuff, they're going to engage me and hopefully have me help them use SharePoint or Project Server or Microsoft Project to set up their project management system. So understand who your audience is, and that will be critical as you grow and groom your personal brand. And lastly, the 5th part, which is very important, you got to expand your network and connect with people because it's domino effect. The more you engage with peers in the industry, and obviously you get to know them, you promote their stuff, and they'll do the same for you, right? So not only you get the benefit of knowing them, but you have the opportunity to engage with their audience as well, and vice versa. And you want to make it a two-way street. So those are the 5 things I can think about as they want to develop their personal brand.
I like it. I like it. You know, a lot of people say that, you know, in this space, they're like, I'm not an extrovert, so I can't do it. What are your thoughts there for the person that kind of considers themselves an introvert? How do they take the steps outside of the 5 you've given there to also get recognized, you know, under that personal brand?
I think you said something that's very critical. You talk about introverts. So this is the first time I'm talking about this publicly. I'm actually an extroverted introvert. So what that means is, while in my professional career, right, you mentioned, oh, I saw Dux on stage, or you're on Twitter or on this video. In my personal life, amongst my family, I'm actually very quiet and introvert. I started thinking about this because one time I forgot if it was my sibling or my wife telling me, like, how come you're so quiet when we're in a family gathering or amongst personal friends, whereas you're out there loud and talking all the time? And I realized, you know, number one, in my work life or quote unquote professional life, you know, I'm very passionate about what I do. And I'm very passionate about sharing the things I know about, in this case, for example, Microsoft 365. And the channels I use are, in a way, technical, meaning, you know, I push stuff on video. It's through technology. I push stuff through Twitter, YouTube. And it's not in a setting where ad hoc, I'm just dropped into a bunch of people and expect me to start talking about stuff, right? So I guess where I'm going with this, how does an introvert develop their personal brand? I think as long as you're passionate about whatever you want to talk about or promote, be it technical or non-technical, you should be fine. And in fact, I think it's an advantage using all these online platforms to promote your brand versus having to do it publicly in a, you know, setting where there's a lot of people ad hoc. So again, you develop it based on, the key is promoting your passion. I think with that, you should be good.
So just some practical steps. And I know you've covered, you know, the why of setting up the personal brand, but what are some practical things? You know, should someone go out, should they start, you know, tweeting, or should they go out and start posting articles on LinkedIn or develop a blog? If they could only do one thing right now, where we are in the market, in hindsight, that type of thing, what's the one platform, the one thing they should do, in your opinion?
In my opinion, in our ecosystem, I would say LinkedIn. You know, if I haven't done anything today and knowing what I know now, I would say LinkedIn is the platform if your focus in your personal brand is to grow professionally. Because, for example, you mentioned Twitter. I mean, I love Twitter. Twitter is great. But frankly, from a professional networking, customer, or even future career perspective, it's not on Twitter. Twitter is a place where you keep up with the latest news, with the latest industry trends. You keep up with journalists, you keep up with fellow technical folks, and it's great, right? But from a growth perspective, I would say LinkedIn would be the place. And the second thing is, if you do pick LinkedIn or any other platform for that matter, you have to be consistent. You know, I see a lot of people engaging on social, for example, only during events, right? Suddenly people come out of the WorkWorks, hey, come to my session in Ignite, or come visit my booth. And then you don't hear from them again until the next one. And people see that, right? So that's number one, you're not really sharing anything worthwhile. Number two is you'll come across as like a used car salesperson. So you got to be consistent about this. When I started, I had to put a schedule. I go, every Tuesday, I'm going to post this. Every Wednesday, I'm going to write that. Even today, I do it. Like Thursdays, I have TikTok Thursdays. I start posting TikTok videos on LinkedIn. And Tuesdays, I have 2-minute Tuesdays. Every Tuesday, I post a 2-minute tip. So you have to be consistent about it. And that's how you can grow your audience and you can grow your connections and interest from people.
Interesting. This is very, very good. Now, as I say, back those 10 years ago when I first saw you present in Wellington, one of the things that kind of stuck in my mind through all this time is that from memory, you were presenting off a Mac device. It might have been remotely connected. I can't even, as in to the projection, in the packed out room that we're in. Tell me about your presentation techniques at live events, kind of, even down to the tech, what do you do to make, an experience where communication is very effective with your audiences?
Sure. You bring up a good observation. So going back to my days when I was an assembler programmer, I remember one meeting I went to, and mind you, at that time, I hated public speaking. I hated meetings because I know I'm very poor at it. And my boss took me to a meeting, which I didn't want to go, but I had to because I had to explain whatever I did. And it was so bad that the customer told my boss they don't want another meeting from us anymore. Wow. It was the lowest of low. So I could have done two things. Act like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm a developer. What do they expect? I'll just carry on and accept the reality. But then I'm like, you know what? How much worse could this be? I'm going to learn how to be a really good communicator. I'm going to show everybody that this thing can be learned. So I took it as a mission where not only I'm going to learn how to better communicate, but convey ideas, teach, present, and I'm still learning. It's been a 17-year journey. And I documented every tip and trick. I took some online courses. I read articles. I watched a lot of YouTube videos of like presenters. And I came up with this formula. And just quickly, here's the formula, right? Number one is, for example, when you put together your abstract, the title, I'm very, very detailed on this. The title should be very specific. You can't just say best practices on Microsoft Teams. That's generic, right? So if I were to change that title, I would say things like how you can achieve Microsoft Teams adoption in 7 steps. So just by looking at that title, I want to do that, 7 steps. And a little secret to it is if you're going to put some number in the title, you don't want anything more than 7 because our brain can only hold up to 7 pieces of information at a given point in time. So if the title was like 99 tips to achieve Microsoft Teams adoption, people will be turned off because they're like, I can't do that. So that's a tip. And then when I prepare for my presentation, I use this framework. Number one, I talk about what's the challenge. So I first paint the picture. Here's the problem, right? You roll out Teams and nobody wants to use it. So you paint the picture. Number two, what's the solution? So I talk about very practical steps. And number three, which is important, it's call to action. You tell people to do stuff. Because if you don't put a call to action, while the presentation might be great, the impact won't be as effective. When I put slides together, for example, if it's an hour presentation, I do the math. If there's demos, each slide is worth 3 minutes. If there's no demos, each slide is worth 2 minutes. So that helps me limit how much slides I create. So if let's say there's a demo, a 1 hour session, I only have 20 slides. That's it. Now, sometimes it's tough, right? People will say, how can you do just 20 slides? I have to, because the last thing I want is, I'm 45 minutes in and I have 50 more slides. And then what happens? I flick through it. People will feel that they're rushed. People will feel like I didn't prepare. So yeah, these are just little things. And then from a tech perspective, I do 2 things. I record my demo, and then I also have the live environment ready. So the recorded demo, I play it, but there's no audio. So I talk over the recorded demo as if I was demoing. That prevents any hiccups, prevents, slow internet or my demo machine dying. But if I do get a question, say, well, Dux, how do you do this? Then I would have my live environment and doing those demos. So those are just some quick tips, but I do have a recording of how to prepare for presentations, be it in person or virtual, I'll share that with you too. So for our listeners, they can click on the link and just watch it.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Just a bit more drilling in on your tech. What's your latest? Do you present from an iPad? Do you present typically from a laptop? And are there any hardware tools that you use?
So in the past, I'm very, very loyal to Mac. And I had Mac everything, iPad, iPhone, everything. But for some reason, about 4 years ago, it shifted. The things I wanted to do, it was just kind of, the Mac looks cool, iPad and iPhone looks cool, but it was just cumbersome now. So now I use Surface Book 2 and I have a Samsung S20 Ultra, and then I carry an iPad with me. So when I present, I would use my Surface Book, because the cool thing with Surface Book, I can write on it with a pen and all that good stuff. And then when I do mobile demos, Windows has a Your Phone app that can mirror my Samsung phone, which is really cool. And then the iPad, what I do is I sometimes demo iPad, because especially with Teams, for example, where we have different devices accessing Teams, so I can show the iOS environment as well. But my primary machine now is a Surface Book 2.
Interesting. Any fancy pointer equipment that's in your tote bag, or any cables or anything like that you make sure, that you have with you?
I just use my Surface Pen as a clicker. And I would say, if you want to, talk about, maybe not fancy, but a little out of the ordinary, I have a Bose frames that's Bluetooth powered. So the mic and the speaker that's connected to my phone is off of my eyeglasses. And what's cool about that is I can talk to it and tell it to do stuff. So without touching my phone, I can say, okay, Google. And, I could do little tricks while I'm presenting.
Very cool. I like it. Just tell me a bit more about your podcast. As in, how did you come about launching that? How did you get underway? What's your plans for it?
Yeah, so this idea came up, I would say, a year ago now. I was at a dinner with a bunch of customers and we talked about podcasts. And I said, look, there's so many amazing podcasts, at least in the Microsoft ecosystem. And then one customer said, yeah, but the challenge is a lot of them, or most of them, are technically focused, right? Like, what's the latest with Azure? What are the new features of Dynamic CRM? There's really no podcast out there that's very customer centric, just sharing the stories of modern workplace transformation from the trenches, the good, the bad, the ugly. We don't want to hear Contoso, because Contoso is always perfect.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I go, yeah, you're right. Because all the podcasts I subscribe to are good. A lot of them are my friends too, but they're all very technically focused. So that kind of started my journey and inspired me to come up with this podcast. And we've been using the hashtag Shift Happens already. So we thought it was a good moniker and a good name for a podcast. And then that's how we started. So we've gotten, phenomenal guests from places like United Airlines, Microsoft, Heathrow Airport, Deloitte. We've got the Belgian police in the most recent one. So the focus of this podcast is 25 minutes talking about modern workplace transformation. Even like the Belgian police, they talked about how they identified a criminal and they connected the dots by using Yammer. It's really cool stories.
Wow.
So it's all very use case driven, customer sharing stories on how their organization transformed with cloud technologies.
Very cool. Listen, I'll get you to get me the link to that, as in to your podcast. So once again, in the show notes, we'll make sure that information is there so folks can click through on that. What part does community play in your career journey? As in, when I say community, the tech community that we operate in, you're an MVP, right? So are you an RD as well? Or
Yes.
Yeah. So, you're obviously involved in community. Tell me, what's your take on it?
Sure. So my first foray into community is the SharePoint community. The SharePoint community is an awesome community. Everybody's tight-knit. In fact, I was very fortunate to be a part of the very first SharePoint Saturday ever in Virginia Beach in 2008. And since then, I got really involved at that time, helped put together a couple of SharePoint Saturdays in DC and New York City and speak at a lot of these events. And fast forward to today, it's just, if I step back and look at how much has grown and has been enabled and supported by Microsoft, it's just amazing to see how many people, especially in this ecosystem, are just willing to help out. And not necessarily just from a technical perspective, educating people, building apps, but also from a personal perspective, like fundraising, helping out. Like during this COVID response, I'm actually hosting a MVP RD call in a week around what the community can do beyond technology. So I'm hearing stories about people making masks and donating it to the local hospitals, and people volunteering, delivering food to their elderly neighbors. So to me, it's just heartwarming to see, sure, we all met in tech, we're all promoting tech, but in times like this, it's the true humanity comes out. In fact, one of the SharePoint Saturdays I remember we hosted back in 2009 is we had a canned food drive and a coat drive. So the idea is, if you attend the SharePoint Saturday, it was around winter, just bring a canned food or a brand new coat that we can donate to the local homeless shelter. So we did that, right? And people would love to do that. So it's just providing this opportunity for people not only to give back from a technical perspective, but also to the local community and the greater community.
So cool. So it's interesting you say that, as in yesterday, a local supplier just came out, as in when I say a coffee shop, with a contactless way of taking orders. And this is, a lot of local businesses have no IT tech or anything like that, And what's happened is that a group of guys, one of them I see is an MVP, got together 4 weeks ago and said, how can we help right now? And they just created a web app. So, no device independent web app, which allows people just to take a photo, put up whatever their product is and set a price and take a payment. Sorry, no payment, just that's all it is. And it's totally free. And it just took, 3 guys coming together, bringing their skills together and putting this up, and then they've got version 2 coming out in a week's time where they'll integrate a payment platform. Now, for so many businesses, the thought of e-commerce, I put up recently in a Facebook group locally here, anybody in e-commerce is going to do well, in this lockdown situation because it's all contactless. And somebody quite genuinely said, what's e-commerce? And there's so many folks out there that have no idea, or it's seen as too difficult, to go online to do something like that. And so I do think that the tech community has so many skills that can help so many people in this time.
That's a great story. In fact, Microsoft put up an online community to facilitate all this. It's called Humans of IT in Microsoft Tech Community, and we'll share the link too. But you'll see amazing stories on how many of our tech folks are helping out, providing outreach. And like you said, not only to share their tech skills, but also any other way they can help their local community.
So good. Now, you work for AvePoint, ISV, probably one of the biggest, in our community. Tell me, what is AvePoint at its core? What does it do? And what's your role within it?
AvePoint is a software company. We build technology to complement what Office 365 has for customers. So we provide technologies in 3 key areas. Number 1, migrating to Office 365 across all different types of platform, be it on-prem file shares or SharePoint or Box or Documentum. So we can help customers with that. Second is we can help customers better manage and govern their Office 365 investment. So for example, Microsoft Teams, in this day and age where a lot of people are using Teams because of remote work, customers are saying they're seeing a surge in Teams, and sprawl can be a consequence of this. So what we can do is we can help manage sprawl of Teams and put the right level of policies and governance. So we make it easy for people to do the right thing. And then the last part is we help protect the data that customers have in Office 365. So in case folks don't know, Office 365 backup capabilities for things that get deleted is limited to about between 2 weeks or 30 days, depending on what you delete. So our data protection technology can help back up Office 365 pretty much unlimited across all the different workloads in Office 365. So those are the 3 things we do. We're global. We have about 1,500 people around the world, and we're in all of the Microsoft data centers. So customers that may require regional data center because of industry regulation or government compliance, we can support them with that. And for me, I served, like I said, as a CMO. I came to AvePoint as a CTO of our public sector business, but 3 years ago, I took on a different role and to serve as a chief marketing officer of AvePoint.
Nice. So you mentioned PubSec, as one of your industry verticals. What are the other kind of key verticals industry-wise that you're strong in?
Sure, we work a lot with financial services and healthcare because a lot of our technologies are used by regulated industries because a lot of the requirements that they have and to comply to. But these days, for example, especially in this COVID situation, we see a lot of our government customers taking advantage of our technology, but also we see industries out in retail who's, like you said, are serving customers more now because they do more deliveries and they need to provide ways for these goods to get to the customers since customers can't get to them. So we're seeing a lot of retail as well leveraging our technologies.
What's your experience been with AppSource? I assume they play a part in your business?
Absolutely. We were among the first Microsoft partners to be a part of AppSource. The very first public sector solution in AppSource was our solution. It's called AvePoint Citizen Services. And then since then, most of our cloud technologies are available in AppSource. It's been a great experience. And as they continue to expand the capabilities, it just provides a streamlined and easy way for customers to not only look what's out there, but also to trial it and interact with partners like us. So overall, it's been a great experience.
Interesting. ISV journey, a lot of folks that listen to this are ISVs or contemplating becoming ISVs. What's your recommendations to them?
So two things, especially in this day and age of the cloud, having something repeatable and something that we can deliver to the customer that's quick and not custom is the most ideal way. My recommendation is look at what are some of the pain points customers are dealing with or experiencing. So we all know Microsoft has a phenomenal platform, but they cannot possibly provide every single solution for every single scenario for every single industry. So just focus on what you think the key pain points are. Like what you mentioned, I'm just spitballing here, but there may be companies that don't even know what e-commerce is. What if you can quickly turn around a solution, put it in AppSource, and somehow promote it to that market, and customers can take advantage of it? So that's one. Find a challenge or a pain point that customers are dealing with that you can provide the solution for. And number two is take advantage of the Microsoft partner ecosystem. First, sign up as a Microsoft partner. You don't have to be, a very large partner, even for organizations like one person or two people. You can sign up and Microsoft provides tons of benefits and resources as a Microsoft partner. And you can start your journey as a partner, specifically as an ISV. And number three, I think if you really want to consider and look at being an ISV is place your bet in the cloud. You can go build the custom stuff for sure, but where the world is moving towards is really making the most of what's out there. And these days, there's only pretty much two major cloud players worldwide. So it's safe to say that if you build something that promotes and supports and complements the Microsoft Cloud platform, the higher likelihood is you get customers and be more stable as you look at the future.
Yeah. Just a little bit of detail here. Over the last year, the whole idea of co-sell or IP co-sell ready has come out. What's that journey been like for you, and what are lessons learned around getting IP co-sell ready?
So that's a great question. IP co-sell program has been out, I would say, almost 2.5, 3 years now. There was a lot of learning experience, especially when it first came out. First of all, for those not familiar, IP co-sell is the idea that your organization and Microsoft field sellers can partner together and essentially share potential business across, be it Microsoft provides you leads to business opportunities and vice versa. And you can log this in a system that Microsoft provides, which they've upgraded and changed recently. So our experience, early on, like I said, it was a learning experience. Certain opportunities and leads weren't routed appropriately, but that was fixed quickly, which is great. But overall, to us, if I look back 2.5, 3 years ago, it was a good business experience, meaning as a result, we've gained new business, we've gained new customers, and hopefully, Microsoft feels this way too. We've actually provided tons of new opportunities to Microsoft as well. I'm grateful to say that we're among the top co-sell partners around the world.
Excellent. Okay, let's wrap up. We've chewed out through our time very quickly. Anything you want to add just in closing before I'm going to jump into some quick fire questions?
Yeah, I would say in closing, I think we live in a very, very interesting time. And we all, especially in this tech ecosystem, should be, I'm sure a lot of us are grateful that we do what we do. And I would just leave with one thing is, look, we are the 1%. And the more we can give back to the broader community, to our local community, the better. So yeah, that's my thing. We got to spread kindness and just give back as much as we can.
I like it. Okay, you ready for some quick fire questions?
Go for it, brother.
Okay. If you had to relive the same day for the rest of your life, which day would you choose?
Are you talking about a specific day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or
Nah, I'm talking about like some events that happened or something like that you would live over and over. I find it funny asking this, especially being that we've all been locked down and had to force live, I feel, days over and over again. But if there's one highlight in your life that you would relive over and over again, what would it be?
You know, one highlight I would say is, man, now you're making me think. There's a couple that comes to mind, but I think of the most recent one, I think one of the memories I go back to is last year, this time, I took a trip with my family. We went on holiday in London, and that was a great time. We did a lot of stuff, but just, again, bonding as a family and showing, especially my kids who haven't been to London, around town and experiencing London. I think that would be something I would relive over and over.
Very cool. What's your dream car?
i8 BMW.
Nice. Wow, that's a big car. It's a sport version, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a hybrid. It's an electric hybrid. It's a mixed gas and electric, and it goes really fast.
If you could know when and how you're going to die, would you want to?
Yes.
Wow, okay. What activities do you enjoy so much that it makes you lose track of time?
Running.
Okay, well, what's the most dodgy thing you've ever done?
Will I get arrested for this?
I hope not.
Actually, and this was a long time ago. I can remember maybe I was a teenager. I was at a restaurant with my friends and we're having a meal, and I didn't pay attention to the bill I paid. I just paid for it. And it turns out that the bill that was given to me was for some other table or customer, which is, I think it was much less than what I ate. And I'm like, should I go back? Maybe I don't go back because I've driven so far already. So somehow that sticks in my head, and maybe that feeling of guilt, right?
That's all good. That's all good. Who would you recommend as a guest for the show in future?
If I can pick anyone?
Yeah. For my show in future, who would you recommend as a guest?
Do they have to be in this tech ecosystem or not really? Or
well, the audience is basically Microsoft consultants, Microsoft staff, kind of TS, SS, global backbouts, those type of thing. Often it's in the show, product team, but it's global, yeah, all around the globe. So who do you recommend?
I would say Donna Sarkar.
I've already had her on.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? Donna's great.
Okay. Here's one. Man, two people come to mind.
Okay, give me both.
So Roxy, I don't know if you know Roxy. She's a customer success manager here in Washington, D.C. for public sector, but she's also a local councilwoman. So the perspective of actually serving the public and also working for Microsoft. So there's that person. And then another person would be Michael Giannotti. Have you met Michael Giannotti?
No.
So Michael Giannotti has been with Microsoft for, maybe 20 years now, or maybe less. But he has a fascinating journey. He started as a school teacher, and then he joined Microsoft, became a SSP, I believe, for SharePoint. And he became one of the lead MTC technical architects. And now he's a Teams, essentially, specialist. And on the side, he makes knives. Like, he's a blacksmith, yeah.
No way. Wow. That's interesting. I'll get you to flick me their email address so I can invite them on the show. Well, it's been great having you on the show. Before you go, where can people follow what you're up to on the social media side of things?
Yeah, so best places to get me, two places. Twitter, my handle is MeetDux, MEETDUX. And then on LinkedIn, look me up, Dux Raymond Sy, Sy, S-Y. There you go.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Applications MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. Remember, full show notes for this episode can be found at nz365guy.com/ 210. That's nz365guy.com/210. Stay safe out there and see you next time.